Welcome to Rocky Broad Solar, where we encourage you to make the current flow. On today's episode, we're going to compare some products between two major rivals in the solar and energy storage industry, Sol-Ark and EG4. Today, we're going to be kind of going over the FlexBoss21 combined with the GridBoss microgrid interconnect device, along with the Sol-Ark 15K. Now, a lot of people are going to see the 15K being compared to the EG4 18K PV. I even did a video on that back a couple years ago when I started my channel, and you're even still seeing them come out today. But in my opinion, the 18K is kind of old news. I feel like we're going to be phasing that out pretty soon. There's just so much benefit to installing the FlexBoss series combined with the GridBoss compared to that original product line of the 18K PV or the Sol-Ark 15K. Let's get into it. All right, so right off the bat, it's very difficult to compare apples to apples with different manufacturers because their data sheets and installation guides don't really line up, don't provide the exact same values. So oftentimes you're kind of comparing apples to oranges, and a lot of that we're going to get into today. And a lot of these features I just avoided altogether because you really just can't compare them. So the max continuous output power of both of these systems when only running on the batteries is 12,000 watts or 12 kilowatts. Now with PV power, EG4 FlexBoss21 can go up to 16 kilowatts, whereas the Sol-Ark is going to go up to 15 kilowatts. So the peak output power, again, we cannot compare apples to apples because the data sheets do not have the same values. EG4 FlexBoss21 has 24 kilowatts for half a second, 18 kilowatts for 1 second, 15 kilowatts for 6 minutes, 13.2 kilowatts for 12 minutes. Now I am assuming those values are, again, battery only, because I mean we have 16 kilowatts continuous, and these peaks are lower than that. So I can only assume that this is specifically in regards to with battery only, but I can't verify that because it doesn't really clarify in the data sheet. So with Sol-Ark, they advertise 30 kilowatts for 10 milliseconds. They then go into apparent power instead of just peak power. So now we're going 24 VA for 10 seconds off grid, 13 VA for 30 minutes off grid. So these all are listed as off grid values. These are not listed on grid or off grid. I'm assuming these are with battery only because a lot of these values fall below that with PV value of 16. With this, it doesn't clarify whether that means off-grid with PV or off-grid with battery only. So I guess the issue here is we just really can't compare apples to apples. We're comparing apples to oranges, and I can't really say which system has more or less peak output power. I'd say overall they look pretty darn similar. Now for the grid pass-through with the EG4 FlexBoss, that is 90 amps. If you pair that FlexBoss with the EG4 GridBoss, then we have a 200 amp pass-through. Sol-Ark just has a 200 amp pass-through in the 15K inverter itself. It does not come with its own microgrid interconnect device like the EG4 system does. So backup transfer time, we've got 20 milliseconds, and then 10 milliseconds is programmable for the EG4 FlexBoss. Sol-Ark comes in at 5 milliseconds. Any of these times are basically not going to be noticeable to the human eye, or maybe just a slight flicker. So in my opinion, it's not really that important, but Sol-Ark has EG4 beat in that regards. Both these systems are meant for 48 volt batteries. They make it very easy to interchange batteries over time and work with different manufacturers if that's your preference. But just so you're aware, you can't pair any kind of high voltage batteries with these systems. So the battery discharge current, EG4 lists 250 amps, whereas Sol-Ark advertises 275 amps. Both have a max altitude of 2,000 meters, or a little bit over, I think, 6,500 feet. Warranties are both coming in at 10 years. The MPPTs, you know, we've got 3 up to 24 kilowatts and 3 up to 23.4 kilowatts. If you're getting value out of today's content, do me a favor. Hit the like button, subscribe, press that notification bell, or leave a comment down in the description below. Let's get back into it. And the idle consumption for the EG4 FlexBoss alone is 65 watts. If you pair it up with the GridBoss has 55 watts of idle consumption. So that would be, you know, a total of 120 watts with the FlexBoss and GridBoss combined. Sol-Ark comes in at 90 watts. So in an off-grid scenario where you're really worried about the idle consumption and you're not using that GridBoss, you know, you can really save a little bit of power there using the FlexBoss21. If you're pairing this with the GridBoss with all these additional features, Sol-Ark is going to have a lower idle consumption. All right, next is the GridBoss. So when paired again with the GridBoss, EG4 has a lot of other benefits as well. So it comes with a set of smart circuits. That is a total of 4 smart circuits, one at 125, one at 80, one at 60, and one at 60. You can use these smart circuits for a variety of different reasons. You can use them for load shedding. So when the power goes out, if you have a lot of large loads in your home, you can program these smart ports to shed loads like your heating and air conditioning, your heat strips, your water heater. You can do that by default. You can do it once the batteries reach a certain state of charge, and you can do it you know, as sort of like peak shaving to shed it if your consumption goes over a certain amount of power. So another thing you can do with those smart ports is use it as a dump load. So once your batteries fill up, the PV is overproducing, your home is not using those loads, and you have excess PV, and maybe you don't want to send it back to the grid because maybe you're in an area where you don't get a lot of credit for your exported PV power. You can then use that smart circuit as a dump load. So for example, maybe you've got a second water heater that you're, you know, once the batteries are fully charged and you're overproducing power, you just want to send it to a water heater, send it to an electric vehicle, or send it to some other load, again, rather than exporting that power to the grid. Sol-Ark, you do have one smart port up to 90 amps, and that's essentially the generator input. So yes, you can get a smart port on there, only if you're not integrating a generator into that generator port on the inverter. So, bypass switch. So when using the GridBoss, you've got a bypass switch built into the GridBoss where you can hit the bypass, which is basically gonna disconnect the PV and only run grid through to your backup and non-backup loads. And that way you can kind of work on the inverter or do whatever you need to do while still passing through grid power to all of your home loads. With Sol-Ark, you don't get that. You know, you'd be installing a separate bypass switch, and that's what you see a lot of the Sol-Ark installers doing out there. Generator, yes, they both have generator integration, and there's a variety of different ways to integrate generators into these systems. So wasn't really able to compare apples to apples there, but yes, they both do have generator integration, and both could really be set up for either a whole home standby generator or like a small backup generator. So AC coupling, that's when you have existing grid-tied PV and maybe you're retrofitting in some new PV and some storage, and you want to tie that old PV system into your system without rewiring everything on the roof or swapping out inverters. You can do that on both of these systems. Now with EG4, I couldn't find a max AC coupling, and that's because the smart circuits can be used for either smart ports or AC coupled PV. So again, I couldn't find a max there. To my knowledge, you could use any one or more of those 4 ports for AC coupled PV. With Sol-Ark, yes, it does do AC coupling, and it maxes out at 19.2 kilowatts. So non-backup pass-through, the EG4 GridBoss has a 200 amp non-backup pass-through. Now a lot of people don't see a huge benefit in that, but there is a lot of benefit, and that's because you kind of don't get constrained by the 120% rule when you're using a GridBoss. So it's a microgrid interconnect device, and by putting that upstream of all home loads, you can really connect a lot of solar and storage without getting into all these tricky electrical codes. Also, maybe there's just some loads in your home that you'll never want to back up, like a hot tub or a pool pump or something of that nature, where you can just install a separate little non-backup panel, land a couple large loads in there, and when the power goes out, they just automatically turn off. With the Sol-Ark 15K, that does not come with a non-backup, so again, you'll have to configure that electrically in a code compliant manner, which can add a little bit of cost to the install. So the GridBoss is service entrance rated. So if you have just a utility meter and you install the GridBoss, you don't need a service disconnect or any kind of other service equipment. As long as you install that Eaton CSR breaker in the GridBoss, it is a service entrance rated disconnect. With Sol-Ark 15K, that is not the case, so you're always going to need a service disconnect or service entrance equipment upstream of the Sol-Ark 15K. So depending on your electrical configuration in your home, that could add, again, another significant cost to the system. EMP hardening. EG4, as time goes on, more and more of their products are getting EMP certified. And right now, I think, the 18K PV, the FlexBoss21, they're wall mount all-weather batteries. They're all EMP hardened standard. I'm still waiting for the release of those indoor wall mount batteries to be EMP hardened, because that's what I have on my home, and I'm hoping that is the case. But at this time, it doesn't look like they are listed as being EMP hardened. With Sol-Ark 15K, you can EMP harden their equipment, but that's going to come at a pretty significant additional cost. I think last time I looked, it added about $2,000 to the cost of the system. With EG4, it just comes standard that way, right out of the box, assuming you're choosing the specific equipment listed on their EMP hardening certifications. And then combiner, right? This GridBoss also, you can combine up to 3 hybrid inverters. And so that's kind of just a built-in combiner panel for people that are installing more than one inverter. That's going to save you a significant amount of cost compared to a Sol-Ark. If you're combining several Sol-Arks all into one system on the same residence, you're getting into having to install a bunch of combiner panels or distribution blocks and things like that. And that can also add a significant amount of cost to your entire system. All right, and on a couple of videos I did several years back, when comparing some Sol-Ark and EG4 equipment, I really struggled. There were a few things I got wrong. Again, we've got these data sheets. Both EG4 and Sol-Ark are constantly updating their data sheets and their installation manuals with revision after revision. And so if you don't have the most up-to-date information, you can get things a little bit wrong. Hey, I'm a human being. I'm not perfect. Is there something I've said that you disagree with? Or is there something that I'm not mentioning between these two systems where one could be maybe better or worse than the other in certain scenarios? If so, drop a comment down in the comment section below. So what are the benefits here of one inverter over the other? In an off-grid application, you can use the EG4 FlexBoss21 on its own. Or maybe if you just have a small partial home backup system, again, you don't need that GridBoss. You can just install the FlexBoss21 all on its own and save a pretty significant amount of cost. But if you're doing whole home backup, combining inverters, you're doing generator integration, AC coupling, maybe you want some smart load management, whatever the case may be, by pairing the GridBoss with the EG4 FlexBoss, you're getting all these features at a pretty decent cost. When you're trying to do a lot of these things with the Sol-Ark system, you have to buy a lot of extra electrical equipment. Big disconnects, big bypass switches. Again, this GridBoss comes with a bypass switch. The Sol-Ark does not. I mean, so it is service entrance rated. The Sol-Ark is not. It has a built-in combiner. The Sol-Ark does not. So, you know, when you're running into this stuff and you're going with the Sol-Ark equipment, you're going to spend a lot of extra money on distribution equipment, bypass switches, combiner panels, distribution blocks. It can really add up. And then the wiring here. So basically with the 200 amp transfer switch built into the Sol-Ark system, you're running 200 amp wires from your utility meter through the Sol-Ark to your home loads. If all of that equipment is not located right in the same general vicinity of each other, that can add thousands of dollars to the cost of your system very quickly as equipment moves further and further apart. With that being separate here between the FlexBoss and the GridBoss, in this case you can locate that GridBoss really close to your utility meter or between the utility meter and your backup loads panel. But you can locate your inverter and your batteries much further away, and you're really just running those smaller wires for the output of the FlexBoss21 from there to the GridBoss. And again, that can save you a massive amount of money on copper and wiring and conduit, especially when your equipment is located quite a far distance apart. So just getting down to cost here, I checked some major distributors on the internet, just looked up the retail price on these products. FlexBoss21 on its own is coming in at $4,199. So if you just have a small home with maybe a 100 amp panel and you don't need all these other features, or you're doing an off-grid, you can really save yourself a little bit of money there over the Sol-Ark. Now when you add the GridBoss, that comes in at $1,999. You get all those features that we've talked about, and combined we're looking at about $6,198 out of the door with the combination. Now with Sol-Ark, just the inverter alone is $6,250 retail. You don't get any of these features. You're going to have to buy a bunch of separate equipment to, if you're combining inverters, if you're needing a manual bypass switch, a service disconnect upstream of the Sol-Ark if maybe one doesn't exist already. On top of that, that alone could add a couple $1,000s to the project. On top of that, the FlexBoss series is coming out EMP hardened out of the box. If you want to EMP harden a Sol-Ark, it's going to bring that system up to $9,500. So by the time you've EMP hardened it, you've bought all your switch gear, your bypass switches, combiner panels, if you're combining inverters, all that, you're talking well over $10,000 to install a system similar to what you get with the combination of the FlexBoss21 and the GridBoss at $6,198. Now, there's still going to be a lot of people out there that want to argue for Sol-Ark. They are a great company. They've been in the industry a very long time. They're very reputable. They're known for having great customer service. But honestly, EG4, all of my experience with EG4 has been phenomenal, and I've had nothing but top tier service from them. And, when you're talking like comparing $6,198 to something that's well over $10,000, and you don't get the benefit of all these smart ports and other features of the GridBoss, I mean, in my opinion, there's just no comparison. The Sol-Ark is just an outdated piece of equipment, and it really can't compete with this combination. I really can't say anything bad about Sol-Ark, but when comparing these two product lines, I just do not see any benefit in going with a Sol-Ark 15K over the FlexBoss GridBoss series. It's really just an outdated piece of equipment, and in this industry, if you're not innovating, you're dying. Right? Just every year that comes out, we have new product lines and new manufacturers running in the industry, competing, innovating, dropping costs, and just driving that competition forward so the industry itself can move forward with lowering prices and just having better products. The Sol-Ark 15K has been around for quite some time. It was the flagship inverter series of Sol-Ark, but in my opinion, it's about time to see some new innovation out of Sol-Ark. If you're interested in Sol-Ark or EG4 products, go ahead down in the description below. Check out some of our affiliate links. You might be able to save yourself a little bit of money on those products. If you're someone needing a little extra help with doing it yourself, go to our website at www.rockybroadsolar.com. Click on our Rocky Broad Solar Ultimate DIY Guide, and it'll give you some great tips and tricks on how to choose the right equipment and also how to install the system in a code-compliant manner that's going to get you through that final inspection. Well, everyone, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Till next time, take care.